Oops, pardon that. So, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. And welcome to another episode of Quranic Marvels. And today we shall discuss how marvelous and miraculous the Quran describes the sun and the moon. In previous episodes, we talked about other cosmological issues. So, we talked about the creation or initiation of the universe and how the Quran makes marvelous descriptions of that. And the expansion of the universe. And then we talked about the creation of the first stars. And then we talked about the protected sky. And then we talked about the atmosphere of the earth. And in this installment, we shall talk about the sun and the moon, our most obvious companions in the sky. And let's start by Al-Quran. Let's start by the bigger one, by the sun. So in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yunus, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, هو الذي جعل الشمس ضياء والقمر نورا وقدره منازل لتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب ما خلق الله ذلك إلا بالحق يفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون. So he says هو الذي جعل الشمس ضياء. He is the one who made the sun diya. And diya is light, but light that has warmth in it. And wal-qamara nuran, and the nur is also light, but cool light. And so the very first thing is miraculous already, because he is using a different term for the light of the sun. He calls it diya, and the light of the moon that he calls nur. And then he talks also about تقدره منازل, and he proportioned its manazil, the places where it goes. And this benefits us in knowing the number of years and doing calculations. ما خلق الله ذلك إلا بالحق. God has created this in truth. يفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون. He is detailing his signs for people who know. So he is also drawing our attention to the matter that the sun and the moon and their movement and the proportioning of the whole thing will have signs for those who are seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that this pursuit needs knowledge. Knowledge about the sun and the moon means that we need to study astronomy, study cosmology, use telescopes, etc. So we have the knowledge. So about the light, this is, for example, a diagram showing, so the sunlight, diya, is coming from the left. And when the moon is in that place, so you can see it is shining a reflection of the sunlight to the face of the earth that is in the shadow, that is essentially at night. And obviously the reflection of the sun from the moon's surface will give us the faint cool light of the moon. When you receive light from the moon, you don't receive light with heat, you just receive cool light. So this is the first miracle that he's indicating that there is a difference between this one and that one. Now, when we go to this other ayah of the Quran, Surah Nuh, he says, so Nuh is talking to his people, and he is enumerating God's gifts to them. So he's telling them, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَجَعَلَ الْقَمَرَ فِيهِنَّ نُورًا وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا. And he made the moon in them light, and he's using nur. وَجَعَلَ الشَّمْسَ سِرَاجًا, and he made the sun siraj. So now he is referring to the moon as a light, but he is referring to the shams as siraj, and siraj is a lamp. So now the reason for the distinction between diya for the sun and nur for the moon is becoming obvious. It is because nur for the moon is on the one hand, and the sun, is calling it a lamp. So it must be that the lamp, we know what a lamp does. A lamp emits its own light. And he is using a specific term for the lamp, which is siraj. And siraj is this old days oil lamp. So in the oil lamp, you have the oil, and then you have this thread, okay, that burns, and it sucks up the oil, and then the oil would burn, and it will give out both light and heat. So a siraj is this device that burns its fuel to produce light, and as a byproduct also of the burning, there is heat. And this drew really my attention. So let's have a look at this depiction of, for example, a candle. And a candle is pretty similar. So the candle has a filament, and the filament is connected to the candle, which is in wax. And the flame will cause the wax to melt, and then the wax will come up the filament and it will burn. And one thing that drew my attention actually was the fact that even in this example, you can see that the temperature, obviously a candle will give out like siraj, will give out light and heat, but also the temperature when you are so close to the filament is like 600 degrees, and it goes, actually it increases when you go a little bit away from the filament at the tip of the flame. It reaches up to 1400 degrees. And this really drew my attention because let's look at what happens in the sun. So this is the sun, and actually the sun's surface is not as even as we would expect, but the sun has those huge flares. And the sun has an atmosphere. You can see that there is a surface, and then you have an atmosphere where there is a gaseous layer that's obviously quite hot. Now, the sun's surface is like 10,000 degrees centigrade. And I was really shocked when I knew that just like a flame of a siraj or a flame of a candle, the sun's atmosphere, the gaseous layer just above the surface, has a temperature that is much more than the temperature of the sun itself. You're talking about an average temperature of 3 million degrees centigrade. And scientists did not know the reason for that. And research and theories measuring the temperature of the sun's surface and its the layer just above the surface found that there is something called nanoflares. And those nanoflares will be very condensed bursts of reactions that produce temperatures up to 12 million degrees. So on the average, those nanoflares will heat up the atmosphere of the sun, where the flares take place, up to an average of 3 million degrees. So even the structure of the flame, the fuel burning of the sun, which is obviously in the case of the sun, the theory is that it is due to nuclear fusion. Even the structure of the flame, the light and a heat that are generated from the sun look like that of a siraj. And obviously, we know that the sun produces both heat and light, and the radiation that we receive from the sun is filtered through our atmosphere to the extent that we receive appropriate light and heat for our benefit. And the same for the siraj. Typically, the siraj would have this glass covering that will protect you from the flame, but you will receive appropriate light, the usable light that you need, and a little heat from the siraj. So a great example of marvelous and miraculous description in the Quran of our two best companions, the sun and the moon. The sun, diya in one ayah, and then siraj in the other. So siraj is the lamp. So you understand that he used the word diya because the sun itself is the lamp. And then he uses nur and nur for the moon. So the moon only has nur. So the moon is not producing its own light. And you understand why those subtle differences in the Quran are giving us all the time signs that whoever has authored the Quran cannot be Prophet Muhammad himself, who had no knowledge of cosmology, to whom the sun and the moon are just those objects in the sky, like other people in his tribe and his country and the world would have thought. They wouldn't know how far the sun is, they wouldn't know how far the moon is, what is the exact composition of this or that, etc. Now let's go to another thing that's even more interesting. So in Surah Yasin, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا ذَلِكَ تَقْدِيرُ الْعَزِيزِ الْعَلِيمِ. And the sun runs to its rest, لِمُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا, until it stops. So even when we have seen the in the previous episodes, when we were talking about the expansion of the universe, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّمَاءَ بَنَيْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ. And the sky we have built it with hands, which signifies power, and we are indeed its expanders. And then in other ayat, it says that at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it's time for doomsday, all this great structure that he has created with power is going to collapse upon his command. وَالْأَرْضُ جَمِيعًا قَبْضَتُهُ وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ. So he's going to collapse the whole thing. فَإِذَا انشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ وَرْدَةً كَالدِّهَانِ, etc., etc. And then he says, يَوْمَ تُبَدَّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ. In the day that the earth will change to another earth and the skies. So in this ayah, he's saying two things. Number one, the sun is running, okay? And that this running has an end. And when it's time, it will stop running. So someone can argue that even the nomad in the desert at the time of Prophet Muhammad can look at the sun and see that it's moving in the sky. But I wouldn't have described actually the sun if I'm Prophet Muhammad as running, tajri. Because running is like moving really fast. And when we look at the sun in the sky, it's not moving really fast. You cannot notice the movement of the sun if you just keep looking at it. You notice its movement over periods of time. You need to have 15 minutes or 1 hour to notice that the sun has moved. It's not like moving like you are watching an airplane in the sky or something, or a bird. But then, to be sure what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means, let's go to this other ayah. Let's go to this. He says, وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ دَائِبَيْنِ وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ. And other ayat also that says, in which he says, وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. They are swimming. لا الشمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر والليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون. So the sun is not supposed to reach to the moon, and the night will not come before the day, and all of them are in orbit swimming. وكل في فلك يسبحون. So when you look at the sun tajri is running, and in another ayah, the sun and the moon, okay, and the other celestial object, the Shamsu ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر, so the sun and the moon are swimming, but the sun is the one that's running. And now I will show you this. I really like this one, this marvelous animation. So let's have a look at it, and you will know what I mean. So this is a depiction of the real movement of the sun and the planets that orbit it, including the Earth and the moon that revolves around the sun. So this is the movement that we think is the case. However, the reality is that the whole solar system is actually moving because the sun is actually not just moving, it's running at 70,000 kilometers per hour speed. Imagine this. Because the sun is revolving around the center of the galaxy, and it takes like 250 million years to revolve around the center of the galaxy. So this is the sun, and this is its trajectory, and those are the planets revolving around it. And due to its gravity, the sun is essentially dragging the planets after it. It's running, and they are running after it, but they are essentially also revolving. And imagine all of this, the sun taking its orbit, وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. It's moving, it's like swimming in space. It's also running, and the others, they just look like they're running after it, right? And this is, if you look to it from a cross-section or from a vertical way, you can think of it as the sun stationary and the others are revolving, but the reality is it's really running at 70,000 kilometers per hour speed, really an amazing speed. So if this is the reality that we have known 1400 years, this is the magnificent reality of God's creation that we know. And now we understand the meaning of those expressions in the Quran. كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. And he is mentioning the sun and the moon. Both are in orbits, swimming in orbits. Now we know about the orbit of the moon. We have known about the orbit of the moon few hundreds of years earlier, but not necessarily at the time of Prophet Muhammad. But we know that the moon is orbiting around the earth. So he says, كُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ, and he mentioned both the sun and the moon. So according to the ayah, the sun has an orbit, and we only recently understand the matter of galaxies. Not recently, like few years, but maybe within the last couple of hundred years, after we have used telescopes and when we understand that we are just in one other galaxy, the Milky Way, and there are other galaxies, and that our sun is actually orbiting the center of our galaxy that we are now trying to explore, and we think there is a big black hole there, a huge gravitational field that is causing all the stars to orbit around the galaxy, including the sun. And the Quran 1400 years ago says the sun and the moon each have their orbit, and they are swimming in this orbit. And he gives the sun this thing about it's running. And then we, at the end of the day, we are able to render this depiction of how the whole system moves. And it is exactly the way the Quran is describing it. So is it by far possible that a person who is living in a nomadic desert, that does not know reading and writing, does not know astronomy, and none of his tribesmen knew this, not even anybody on the face of the earth had any slight idea about the matter of galaxies, solar systems, the sun is just one other star, stars orbit around the galaxies, stars like the sun has an orbit around the center of the galaxy, just like the moon has an orbit around the earth. And he used the moon because the orbit of the moon around the earth is something that we figured out. And he's saying this one is like this one. It's totally impossible for anybody other than the one who has created this design for the cosmos to be able to use these words in this very intricate usage of language. Now, we go to this ayah in Surah Ibrahim. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ الشَّمْسَ وَالْقَمَرَ دَائِبَيْنِ وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ. He has made for you. Sakhara is like he made it a servant to you in your service. الشمس والقمر دائبين, they don't stop. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمُ اللَّيْلَ وَالنَّهَارَ. In the previous ayah, he says, الشمس تجري لمستقر لها. Here he says, دائبين, they are going. So we understand that when he says, والشمس تجري لمستقر لها, that its mustaqar, the end of its motion, will be with the end of the motion of the whole cosmos. But at that time, God will not explain that there is cosmos and this moves and that moves, etc. But we see the apparent movement of the sun and says, here he says that this movement is da'iba, the sun and the moon are da'ibain, but we need to remember that even the largest object that we see in our sky, the sun, obviously the apparently largest object, will stop when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands that the whole universe comes to a stop. Now he says, he سخر لكم الشمس والقمر دائبين وسخر لكم الليل والنهار. They are in our service. And in this ayah also, in Surah An-Nahl, it says سخر لكم الليل والنهار والشمس والقمر والنجوم مسخرات بأمره إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يعقلون. So he has made to your service the night and the day and the sun and the moon and the stars are put in your service with his command. إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يعلمون. Surely in this are signs for people who think, who use their brains, who use their minds. And this is definitely something that is eye-catching. Because we know today that the origin of every bit of energy that drives biological life on the face of the earth is the sun. The sun is delivering to us the heat that's keeping us warm. The sun is delivering to us the light that is absorbed by plants, and plants do photosynthesis, and plants produce food. Fertilize the soil for other plants, produce food for animals. We eat both plants and animals. So at the end of the day, at the top of the food chain, sitting the human being, and the sun is providing us with all this great service, as he said. And the moon, on the other hand, is not just like an ornament in the sky. The existence of the moon and the size of the moon and the distance of the moon from the earth and the relation between the earth and the moon is essential for life on earth. Without the moon, we would have had great problems on the face of the earth, and we might as well put that on a separate episode. But how would again a person like Prophet Muhammad say that the sun and the moon, this couple, is essential for our service, for our life on earth? Once again, amazing. Now another thing I would like to start by reminding you of this ayah in Surah Ar-Rahman. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. الشمس والقمر بحسبان. The sun and the moon with great calculation. What does it mean? Let's look at this picture. This is a picture of the sun and the moon. And this is essentially their apparent size. When you look at the sky, you see, and you can maybe use sunglasses or something and look at the sun. And then at night, look at the moon. We notice that the apparent size of the sun and the moon is very, very similar. Actually, they are not similar at all, because the diameter of the sun is 400 times the diameter of the moon. 400 times. So we need to put 400 moons side by side, and then the total diameter will be equal to the diameter of the sun. So the sun is actually huge compared to the moon. I'm talking in terms of size, not talking in terms of mass or in terms of anything else, just size. And to get an idea about this size comparison, this is the sun on the left, and to the very far right, this is the earth. So the sun is like 100 times the diameter of the earth. And this is the moon, a speck that we can barely see. So you need 400 of those specks put side by side to reach the size of the earth. So then we have this question. How come the size of the sun, which is huge, and the moon look exactly the same in the sky? And they are actually exactly the same. And how do we know that they are exactly the same? We know from eclipses. So when we have a solar eclipse, a total solar eclipse, this would be the picture. And depending on the time of the year, this might also be the picture where a small rim of sunlight will be available around the moon, if the moon is at its apogee, or if it's the farthest point from the earth or the nearest point from the earth, etc. And according to the time of the year and other parameters. But the relative size of the sun and the moon will be to the extent that the moon will cover almost all the sun except for a very small rim. Why is this the case? It is because of this crazy calculation that I'm going to tell you. The sun is 400 times as big in terms of diameter as the moon, but in the same time, the sun is 400 times as far as the moon from the earth. So the distance from the earth to the moon versus the distance of the earth to the sun, you will find that the sun is 400 times the distance from the earth to the moon. And since we know that when something goes farther, it appears smaller, and the distance proportion is 400 versus a size proportion of 400, essentially, when we look at the sky, we see the sun and the moon the same size. And if this is not calculation, and if this is not design, and if this is not a sign by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling you that He is the one who has created, that there is a designer, and then He comes in His book and He tells you, I'm going to give you a sign. Remember here when He said, إن في ذلك لآيات لقوم يعقلون. So it needs you to use your brain, right? And then here He says, الشمس والقمر بحسبان, and حسبان is great calculation. The semantics of the word حسبان is not just بحساب, calculation, or بحسبان, plenty of calculation, great calculation, sophisticated calculation. And it is indeed like that. To make the sun at a size that exactly compensates versus its distance versus the size and distance of the moon to the earth, so that when they both come in an eclipse, we are sure they are the same size. If this is not calculation and if this is not design, then what is? Then what is? And He says, وَجَعَلْنَا, remember the first things, وَجَعَلْنَا in this ayah, هو الذي جعل الشمس ضياء والقمر نورا وقدره منازل. Remember this ayah, وقدره منازل, and He proportioned its locations. Okay, لتعلموا عدد السنين والحساب, so you know the count of the years and the calculation. ما خلق الله ذلك إلا بالحق. Allah has not created this except by in truth. يفصل الآيات لقوم يعلمون, detailing the signs for people who know. And then when we know, and then when we are able to use mathematics, and then when our knowledge is able to measure distances and to measure relative sizes, we find this amazing fact. Once again, if you look at all those signs and you cannot see that there is a designer, and that this designer not only did this, but has sent you in His book saying, look here and there, look to the sun, look to the moon, look to the place of the moon, look to that the sun is running, look, they are swimming, etc., etc. They have an orbit, etc., etc. And these are my signs. I am telling you this so that you know I am the designer. And then you still don't believe, number one, that there is a designer and He can only be God because He is the one who created the sun and the moon and the cosmos and the galaxies. This is the definition of a God. And it has to be only one God, because this ultimate power has to be the one God. And then you receive a book where He tells you, look at this place, you will find my sign. And you look at the sign and you find Him. You find the evidence for design of a creator, of a most wise and powerful and magnificent creator, and you still don't accept Him, then this will be your problem. But what are the evidence pointing to? There is one God, He has sent a messenger, and the evidence is the message itself. The message says that the sender is the one God, and hence the one who has delivered it is His messenger. Now, there are people who have eyes that can see, and hearts that believe and minds that think, even according to the ayat. He says, يعقلون, يعلمون, and people who will just see this information and look the other side. So it is up to every person who has listened to this and the previous episodes and the coming episodes to make your own resolution. It is your own destiny, whether to accept that this book can only come from the designer of and the creator of the universe, and hence this creator surely, number one, does exist, number two, cares, number three, has sent messengers, number four, Prophet Muhammad is his messenger, number five, this Quran is his book, and in his book he says, here is the evidence that I am there and I care, and I want you to use this universe in which I created you in this specific way, and you are coming back to meet me. Just like the sun, تجري لمستقر لها, you will live until I bring you back to me. And this whole universe will be essentially in his hand. And then he will create new land and new earth and new skies. And in this new sky, there is heaven. And there is only two places. There is the good place and the bad place. There is Jannah and Nar. There is Jannah and Jahannam. And we are here to make our choice. So I hope everyone who is listening to this makes the right choice, and that we all meet in Jannah. I have finished my presentation. If there are questions, I will be glad to answer them. Otherwise, we will call it a day. So if anybody has questions, just please write it in the live chat. We can add like 5 or 10 more minutes for questions. So, very well. Doesn't seem we have plenty of questions today. So I conclude this session. And today I also had an interesting episode on the Arabic channel. For those who have not seen it, you can go to the Arabic channel. You can find it in the recommended channels on the channel. And it was about Maslow's pyramid and how the Quran explains Maslow's pyramid in a magnificent way. Also, on Thursday, I will be giving another lecture in Arabic on the Arabic channel. And there has been a very interesting lecture this last Sunday with Dr. Ahmed Gum'a about the eye and how the eye sees in 3D. Highly recommended for everyone to have a look on it and see it. On Saturday, we will have another episode of our evolution course, continuing, inshallah, this coming Saturday, continuing the central dogma of biology. And then we'll also have a live Q&A after that. So if you have questions, if you're not subscribed to the evolution course already, please do. You can find it on the website, and the address of the website is there. If you are not subscribed already to the Telegram group or the Telegram channel, where I send notifications about new content and live streams, also please subscribe to the Telegram channel. You'll also find it here in the ticker, or just write on Telegram, just write Finding Truth channel, and you will have access to the channel to see the notifications there. Thank you everybody. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Peace be upon you all, and السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Please don't forget to like the video, and please put a target to yourself to share it with at least 10 persons that you know, and invite them to the channel. And who shows people the way actually gets the same reward. So الدال على الخير كفاعله. So don't deprive yourself from the thawab. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.